Just when you thought Nintendo had nothing up their sleeves, they shocked the world with a game that I never knew I wanted, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, which not only acts as a sequel to Hyrule Warriors in terms of the Warriors fashioned gameplay, but also acts as a prequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild in terms of story and graphics. There are a ton of things to get hyped over this insane project of a game, but as a hardcore Zelda fan and a fan of both Breath of the Wild and Hyrule Warriors, I've got 10 on my list as my top reasons why I'm hyped for Age of Calamity. This is HMK and let's get hyped. If you enjoy this video and my Zelda content, be sure to hit that like, favorite, share, and most importantly subscribe to HMK as I post content every week. Alright, let's dive right into the noise with number 10. So yeah, with this game, technically we have a Breath of the Wild trilogy. While it may not be Breath of the Wild 1, 2, and 3, we are getting Breath of the Wild Age of Calamity, which effectively starts kind of like a Breath of the Wild 0, and the Breath of the Wild sequel that's currently in development. Thanks to Age of Calamity, this is going to be the first time within the Zelda chronology where there's 3 games focusing on the same Link in the same world in different time periods. The time of the Great Calamity 100 years before Breath of the Wild, and the Breath of the Wild sequel that is currently in development, which obviously takes place after the first game. It's so interesting to see a concept like this in which we explore Link like never before, this iteration of Link, in terms of where he is, where he was, and where he's going to be. And honestly, I am all here for this Breath of the Wild trilogy juice. The sheer scope and ambition of this project is insane. I keep thinking to myself, wow, Nintendo really is going out here making a Hyrule Warriors game based on the Great Calamity from Breath of the Wild. I mean, that's wild. And then when you take the scope of Breath of the Wild inherently and try to apply that with Age of Calamity, then you've got a match made in heaven in my opinion. With the idea of the multiple playable characters, all of their weapons, and the legitimate war that is the Great Calamity, it seems like it's going to be a lot to take in. A grand world, a grand war, epic set pieces, amazing visuals, solid gameplay, and incredibly high stakes. It seems a little too good to be true, yet here we are and it's coming out very soon. As we all know, by the time of Breath of the Wild, the champions have already fallen in battle 100 years prior. But thanks to their importance and the memories Link shared with them, and of course the DLC, we know that there are very interesting and intimate relationships between each character. But you know, due to the huge time skip and the fact that they're dead, we really couldn't get the full grasp and understanding of each of these relationships. We can only get footnotes. It's going to be super great seeing how these characters are fleshed out individually and how they interact with one another. And honestly, thank goodness we're going to see this in a game because I feel a book would not be able to do it justice. When we first woke up in the expansive, immersive land of Hyrule, the grandest of any imagining, the land was truly in ruins. Sure, it was beautiful, but there was a lot of malice everywhere. Houses, buildings, and camps were destroyed, and overall, the land was in an immense state of decay in which nature was taking back the earth. This was all due to the Great Calamity which fell Hyrule 100 years before Breath of the Wild. But now, with Age of Calamity, we get to see all of those environments, the true world of Hyrule in the splendor that is truly deserved. Places like Hyrule Castletown, Akala Citadel, along with the various towns and camps scattered across the land. It's gonna be great seeing all these places and seeing them all catch fire. Now, of course, Age of Calamity acts as a prequel to Breath of the Wild, but we do know Breath of the Wild 2 is in development, and Eiji Aonuma gave us a little bit of an update when presenting and revealing Age of Calamity. But at the same time, we need to understand and think about possible story connections and whatnot that can help set up Breath of the Wild 2. Because according to the producers, it was very important for Aonuma to get the story out of what truly happened 100 years before Breath of the Wild in the Age of Calamity. In a way, it could be setting up a grand tapestry of lore and understanding that will help drive home what's going to go down in Breath of the Wild 2, especially since we're dealing with the Calamity, Calamity Ganon, and in Breath of the Wild 2, we're going to be dealing with the Source, what I like to call Calamity Ganondorf. Okay, the graphics. Let's step back and appreciate the graphics of Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, because man, like, I'm so glad they decided to go with the Breath of the Wild style graphics. When I first heard that we're gonna get another Hyrule Warriors game focusing on Breath of the Wild, I was kind of scared that I was gonna be focusing on the previous iteration of Hyrule Warriors graphics. I mean, they weren't bad for the time, but I wouldn't have wanted a Breath of the Wild focused Hyrule Warriors game to not have Breath of the Wild style graphics, and we're getting it, and I am super excited. And the fact that this game is specifically for Nintendo Switch and doesn't have to worry about constantly loading out a huge overworld all at once, I feel the final product with this graphical style is going to definitely wow us in ways that the original Breath of the Wild couldn't, and possibly give us an idea of how clean Breath of the Wild 2 could look. Now, this is pretty important for me. I love the warrior style gameplay. Dynasty Warriors, Samurai Warriors, Warriors Orochi. So when the original Hyrule Warriors was announced, I was flipping out, and I loved the game for its gameplay. So now that we're getting a Breath of the Wild styled Hyrule Warriors game with a little bit of Breath of the Wild flavor in it, I mean, you saw that flurry rush, right? I am bouncing off the wall. I cannot wait to handle the characters such as Link, Zelda, Mipha, Daruk, Revali, Urbosa with their own individual fighting styles and how they can get real crazy from what we saw in Breath of the Wild in Age of Calamity. I find it exhilarating, sprinting across a battlefield, one versus an army, destroying and hacking your way through hordes of enemies. And seeing this gameplay in action within the world of Breath of the Wild, Nintendo, give it to me now. Now, of course, before the Age of Calamity, the only things we had to go on when it came to what happened 100 years ago before Breath of the Wild was thanks to the book Creating a Champion, known as Masterworks in Japan. In this book, we got a lot of revelations of how things worked within the story of Breath of the Wild, and a lot of context to the characters, events, and areas before and after the Great Calamity. So before we got the confirmation of Age of Calamity, we had a little bit to go off on. But now, thanks to this upcoming game, we might see a lot of what we read in that book happen in real time. We already got that in the trailer, with the guardians coming out of the Sheikah pillars that rose around Hyrule Castle. With that in mind, I can expect a lot more connections to Creating a Champion and Age of Calamity. And I'm telling y'all, after reading that book front and back, we can expect some awesome, cool stuff. While of course, this is the story of what happened 100 years before Breath of the Wild, the Age of Calamity, and we should have a good idea of what to expect, that still doesn't mean we can't get new story revelations within this title. Yeah, sure, we know the hanky-panky, oh yeah, Great Calamity, it happened, it destroyed Hyrule 100 years ago, the champions fell, Zelda got swallowed up, you have to save the world, Link. We know about that shebang, and despite what we read from Creating a Champion, we honestly don't know enough about the truth behind the Calamity, how exactly Hyrule decided to prepare for it, and of course, the war that went down during the events. Sure, there's a ton of footnotes, but they only go so far, so I am extremely excited to know what we don't know about the Calamity, the war, and what led up to it. I can already feel it. There's gonna be some juicy stuff to be revealed. Nintendo is wild just revealing this like 2 months ahead. Oh yeah, and the final marker, the number one thing that I'm excited about, and I know that a bunch of you guys are not ready for, is the death, sadness, and despair. The utmost despair that Age of Calamity is going to give us. We all played Breath of the Wild, and we all know what went down already. Now we're gonna get first-hand experience of what truly went down, and it's all going to end in tears, and I am ready to get hurt again. We are going to see the rise of the Calamity, the fall of Hyrule, the fall of the kingdom, the fall of the king, the soldiers, the last stand Link is going to have at Fort Hatano, and yes, the deaths of our dear friends, the champions. But don't fear, with this madness and sadness, it will truly test and strengthen our resolve in order to build from the ashes that we see in Age of Calamity in Breath of the Wild 2. You might call me crazy, but I am ready and willing to fight the unwinnable battle. With the game coming out in November, I honestly cannot wait for everything this title is going to offer us. And honestly, Nintendo really came in clutch for 2020 and Zelda fans with this game. But what do you think? What is something that has you hyped about Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity? Leave your thoughts, theories, and more in the comment section below. And while you're at it, please like, share, favorite, and most importantly, subscribe to HMK to keep the content flowing every week. Big thanks to my Patreon supporters for helping making this video happen. If you want to find out how you can support HMK for just $1 a month, please check out my info in the description box below. Alright guys, until the next Zelda video, this has been HMK, and I'll see you in the Age of Calamity. I'll check you guys later.